Welcome to the Early Education Conversation, where we discuss the transformative power of early learning with thought leaders, educators, and community members.
Welcome to Early Education Conversations. I'm Aruna Gilbert, Chief Program and Policy Officer at the Early Learning Coalition in Palm Beach County. Today's conversation feels especially meaningful to me, not just as someone working in early learning, but as a mental health therapist and a social worker. Because in my clinical work, I've always understood children through their emotional experiences first, how they feel, how they regulate, how they make sense of the world around them. And what's been interesting to me is that in early learning systems, we don't always start there. We talk about readiness, we talk about literacy, we even talk about outcomes. But underneath all of that is the emotional life of a child. So I'm really excited for today's conversation. I'm joined by Dr. Donna Housman, founder of the Housman Institute and creator of Excel, Emotional, Cognitive, and Social Early Learning Framework. Donna, I've known you for a bit now, and we're actually using Excel in Palm Beach County. And the feedback from teachers is incredibly strong. I'm really excited to talk to you today, so welcome.
Thank you, Aruna, for having me. I am so delighted to be here and have an opportunity to share thoughts and experiences together with you. It's been such a delight working with Palm Beach County and your team, and I'm really looking forward to today.
I am too, not just about the curriculum, but also talking to you about the thinking behind it. So I'll start with, what does early learning mean to you?
Okay, to me, early learning is the foundation upon which every child's future is built. And it really begins far earlier than most people realize. It's the understanding that from the moment a child enters the world, they're learning. Children are born ready to learn. And not just about facts or skills, but they're really learning, as you were just pointing out, how to feel, how to connect, how to relate, and how to really understand themselves and their friends across their play space. As you just pointed out again, Aruna, early learning is emotional learning first. So before a child can really absorb academic content, they must first learn how to recognize what they're feeling, how to name it, how to manage it, and how to move through it with the support of a trusted adult.
It's kind of like the chicken and an egg, Donna. What comes first, cognition or emotion?
My feeling is, and through the research and the experiences and the many decades I've been doing this, emotion really is first in terms of children's development. It's really the foundation. I mean, children are born with their universal first language, which is that of emotion. And they have to really learn how to understand it, how to manage it, how to regulate it. And they're not born with those skills and how to do that, but they are born with the ability to be able to learn how to manage these skills. And when they manage these skills, then they're really open up to really absorbing and developing more ability to bring in academic content. Emotional learning, in my opinion, is what is the foundation for all further learning.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. We had Isabel Howe here a couple of months ago, and I talk about her almost every single podcast because that's exactly what she talks about, right? Relationship and learning. So
Mm-hmm.
Donna, when you think of this work and your beginnings in this work, what drew you to this work? Like, what was the moment where you realized this is the piece we're missing?
I started out as a clinical psychologist many moons ago, and I was working with really, a lot of young children, but all the way through into young adulthood. And, these children were really struggling with very significant issues such as depression, suicide. And I realized that the common thread among all these kids was an inability to really manage big emotions. And so it was then that I thought at the time, if we could start really early, when the brain is developing so rapidly and can be informed and shaped by children's daily experiences, and help children really begin to learn how to manage their own emotions and understand the emotions of others, the skills of emotional intelligence, and help the adult really learn more about their own emotionality, their triggers, and how to really deal in a more effective way with their own emotions, given the fact that children develop in the context of relationships, then we could really change the trajectory of children's development and set them on a path of healthy brain development and success in learning and in life. And so it was then that I thought, okay, let's really begin this process. And so it was back in probably the mid 80s when I started in early learning school for children from 3 months up through kindergarten. And it was there that I really started to practice, design, develop, and research this theory, which then became called EXCEL, which is an acronym for Emotional, Cognitive, and Social Early Learning. And the research over the years really showed that children that went through this program significantly outperformed the control group in emotional intelligence, self regulation, empathy, executive functioning, and learning. And it was there that we were off to the races because we had children from all over the world at this school, and it was very effective with each and every child. So we really wanted to see how could we scale this so that as many children as possible could really benefit from this approach. And so that led me to starting Housman Institute, Housman Learning.
That's just amazing. And like you said, for such a long time, early learning has been framed through cognitive development. And, when you look at it from a clinical perspective, when a child is dysregulated or doesn't feel safe, learning doesn't really happen. So, can you talk about that connection? How does emotional development shape a child's ability to learn?
That's a great question, Aruna, because we're going to get into just for a few seconds a little bit about the
Mhm.
brain. Because what happens is, when children are born, the first 1,000 days, let's say, so the first 3 years of life, the neural connections are forming. 1 million neural connections are forming every second. Just think about that. Every second, there are 1 million neural connections forming. And these connections, brain development is really the function of the interaction between genetics and experience. So we have an opportunity to really help inform and shape the architecture of the brain for lifelong.
Mhm.
And so the brain does not do well with chaos, with dysregulation. The brain cannot learn when it's overwhelmed by emotional dysregulation. So in order for children to be able to learn, the emotional dysregulation has to be managed. And so when we can help children learn how to manage the dysregulated emotion and behavior, then that opens up the pathway for children to be able to learn academically, absorb information, and really begin to achieve and attain their goals and their dreams.
Yeah, Donna, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about what we've been hearing a lot of, so using different words for different things. And, sometimes I think that really confuses people with just the basic and the simplicity of what you just said, right? Even though it's brain science, it's rather simple when you lay it out. And so when we're talking about this new buzzwords of executive functioning, and we're really talking about self-regulation, impulse control, attention, flexibility, those types of things, how do you explain executive functioning in a way that resonates with teachers and parents? And what does that really look like in a classroom?
Okay, so again, back to the brain just for a moment, the emotional circuitry and the cognitive circuitry are interrelated. So the more we strengthen children's emotional skills, the ability to identify, manage, express constructively their emotions, that in turn strengthens the executive functioning skills, the skills of attention, reasoning, problem solving, decision making. So they are very much connected. And in the classroom, that's, when a child is able to follow directions, when a child is able to listen and attend to instruction or what is being said to them, when a child is able to problem solve and make decisions, these are examples of executive function skills.
So, Donna, what are we missing when we interpret challenges as behavior instead of emotional signals?
Well, that's a really important yet challenging question because children typically express their emotions in action, in behavior. And so what we see is the behavior. And what we need to understand is that there are emotions that are driving this behavior. And we need to understand what those emotions are so we can help children begin to understand that there are things that they're feeling, frustration or anger or sadness, whatever that emotion may be, that is driving the way that they act or behave. And so when they can learn how to begin to recognize what that feeling is, begin to learn how to express it in constructive ways, and be able to manage and regulate it, then that behavior that we're seeing is lessened or mitigated, and the emotion is what is expressed in terms of then being able to resolve whatever the emotion may be. And if they're frustrated, for example, we talk about if a 3-year-old is experiencing frustration, helping that 3-year-old understand, okay, so what is causing you to be frustrated right now? Or the 4-year-old, who is feeling really sad, being able to help that 4-year-old, give a name to that feeling in terms of feeling sad. And when they have that information, then they're able to really start to make sense about what this feeling is about, what's causing it, and then how to really solve the problem or the issue, so that they can feel better and continue to move forward.
I love that. I mean, that just so concretely lays out how children learn through their emotions. Let's pivot a little bit because this program Excel is foundationally about how the child learns, but also connected to that is the educator piece, what's happening in the classroom. So, as we're pivoting to the educators, what do you think feels different for the teacher using Excel in a classroom?
Many differences, Aruna, because so often, programs or supports are designed for the child. And the teacher is, as we know, so foundational and critical to children's development and learning. And we need to be able to provide the educator with the tools they need so that they can manage their own emotions and be able to then model and guide and respond more appropriately to the child in helping to instill these same competencies within the child in terms of, being able to, again, manage and deal with their own emotionality. Teachers are critical, and we need to be able to, in Excel, what we do is we really support the teacher first in helping them understand their own emotionality, because we know that children develop in the context of relationships. And if we're not dealing with the critical adult in the relationship, then the child isn't going to be able to really develop these critical skills and competencies that they need, because children learn through observing, through imitation, and how we respond to them and how we model and guide them. And all of that requires the adult to be able to have the support they need in being able to be their best. And instead of just putting out fires, to be able to really do what they entered the field to do in terms of their passion and commitment, which is to help children develop and learn.
I'm listening to this and I really think that, what a gift, right? What a gift to be able to help our teachers to understand their own emotionality as they're in the classroom and translate that to their behaviors and their efforts to help a child. And so for me, it seems like this work for the teacher really helps the teacher to shift from what is this child doing to what is this child experiencing. Was that your intention?
Yes, it was, because children need to understand that so that they can move forward in much more healthy and constructive ways. But in addition to the teacher being able to have that support so that they can really, engage with children in these helpful and important ways, what we're also finding is that it doesn't stop within the classroom. It extends to outside the classroom, because when you're helping someone really begin to understand what their triggers are and how to manage their own big emotions, their stress, their anxiety, that doesn't just get, kind of siloed into one area. That is something that is part of the person. So no matter where they are or with whom they're interacting or having experiences with, that's what they're bringing to those relationships. So what we're being told is that it doesn't end in the classroom. It really extends personally at home and with relationships outside of school.
Yeah, and we're certainly hearing that from the teachers using it in Palm Beach, right? We've heard things where teachers have said, I use that at home with my husband, with my children, around the dinner table. The make peace moment seems to be taking off in Palm Beach County's kitchens and living rooms. So not just in the classroom, and it's really wonderful to observe when children are able to negotiate their feelings and negotiate solutions to whatever might be bothering them at that moment. And that's a really interesting moment to watch children find their confidence, because the more they're able to resolve their feelings and, talk through their issues, the more confident they feel that they can show up in the world and be able to do what they need to do.
And that happens because, in terms of you mentioning the make peace table,
Mhm.
this is an opportunity for children to really bring together their feeling self with their thinking self,
Yeah.
emotion with cognition. And it's where children are beginning to understand and practice this in terms of first understanding that emotions also live in their body. So they have to really be able to first regulate physiologically their body. So, we help children do that with breathing to start out with, or with squishy toys, or whatever is helping to really regulate the physiology, their feeling about being out of control. And then once that happens, we're able to then help them begin to articulate, to put into words, to help better organize the experience or the conflict they're experiencing in words, so that they can start to share what the problem is, what they think and are experiencing the problem to be. And they're to listen to one another as each of them share that, what the problem is. And then they're able to then talk about, well, what is the feeling connected to this experience? I was really angry, as being a child. They're saying, I'm really angry because I was really working hard and building this tower, and Johnny came over and he knocked my tower down. And that made me really, really mad. And so when Johnny hears this, Johnny may then respond and say, well, I didn't knock down your tower. I saw this beautiful blue block right in the middle that I wanted to use to build with. So I went and I just took it. But then your tower just came down on itself. So this is where children begin to express and understand more of the intention behind a behavior, and then they're more able to resolve the problem. So then the question is posed, so how are we going to, what is an idea you may have to, resolve this problem? And so each child is given the opportunity to come up with an idea that will resolve the problem. Sally may say, well, if you want the blue block next time, you need to tell me that, and I'll let you know when I'm finished building my tower. The other child, Johnny, may say, well, I think that maybe you can invite me over and I can build it with you. So they have these two different ideas, and then they're asked to kind of negotiate and compromise these real cognitive skills that are so important, and then come up, agree to a solution. And then they agree to the solution, and then they revisit how they feel. And oftentimes, what you'll get is moving from feeling really frustrated or sad or
Mhm.
angry to I'm feeling more calm, or I'm feeling proud, or I'm feeling excited. The goal is not to feel happy. That may be a result, but the goal is to feel better than you felt before. And what that does is it allows the child to learn that they are developing a sense of agency, a sense of
Mhm.
control. And that is so important because that's what we want to provide our children with, that feeling. Because typically, when they're out of control, what they need more and most of all is to feel in control. And it's not the adult controlling the child, because we know that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's helping the child begin to learn the skills of how to develop self-control, a sense of agency. And this allows them to feel pride and feel so good about themselves and take initiative and take risks, because they're developing these skills that they know they can take with them in other situations. And this is so important also in learning, because it's not only about situations that may come up in a play situation, but children can feel frustrated or angry or anxious about learning new subjects that they may have a real hard time understanding. And those emotions can prevent them from going forward and learning these different subjects like math or literacy. And again, it's up to the adult to help children learn how to manage these emotions so they don't obstruct and get in the way of them learning.
Yeah, what you're making me think about is, often when I'm looking at classrooms and teaching and all of it, what you really see is the separation of behavior from emotions in ways that really limit our understanding of children. And what it leads to oftentimes is responding to symptoms rather than the root cause of what's happening. And so to hear you talking about how children resolve those things really brings to mind that piece. So, at, as we're in this space, I wondered if you had any thoughts about what are we still getting wrong about social emotional development?
Yeah, okay. So then you were just referring to, something that I talk about all the time, which is so important, the difference between behavioral management and behavioral change.
Mhm.
And the only way we're going to get to real change is understanding what's causing us to do what we're doing in the first place. And until we understand that, we're not going to be able to change it. And so that is a big part of what we do with both the children and the adults, is helping them reflect, think about what is causing me to do or to act or to feel the way I'm feeling. And once they can address what the cause is, then they have the ability to, again, resolve the problem and change the behavior, or they may decide to keep it. But nevertheless, they have that option to be able to take control and change the behavior once they understand what's causing it.
So let's pivot a little bit to what you see now. You've been doing this for a while and you've done extraordinary work. How do you see your life's work showing up in this moment?
In this moment, what we're seeing is a lot of children carrying around tremendous emotions and it's getting expressed in tremendous dysregulated behavior. And that dysregulated behavior is interrupting the ability for children to play, to engage, to learn, to, their sense of wonder, to explore, discover. That is what we really focus on, is really helping. There's one question that I have been studying for the last 40 years. And that is, how do we provide every child with the emotional foundation that they need to learn, to grow, to thrive, and succeed? That is what is at heart in terms of what has been created, is providing those experiences, those opportunities for children to do that. And also, again, for the adult to provide, the support that they need to be the best they can be in the field they chose, in order to be with children, help them to develop and thrive and grow, as we do also with the children. So this is really what's at the heart of Excel, is really looking at all those various domains of children's development, as we've been talking about the emotional, and we've been talking about the cognitive, and the social as well. Because, classrooms are not just academic places, schools are not just academic places, they're very social places. And that's where the relationships are so important. And these relationships get developed and built through, children's play. It's a wonderful opportunity for them to learn about themselves and one another, and also to develop self-control, because typically, in a play situation, if a child is assigned, okay, they're going to be, the fireman, and someone's going to be the policeman, and someone's going to be, the child, and the policeman ends up crying because they're not getting their way, well, the fireman's going to come in and say, policemen don't cry when they don't get the way. They figure, they work out the problem. And so the response from the peer is really kind of, in the play situation, is helping the child start to kind of recognize, okay, well, I need to kind of control that and do it in a different way. Play becomes very important, but relationships are the playground for children to learn about themselves and their friend across their play space, in their world around them. And so relationships are critical in children's development and learning. And that is the same between the child and the educator. That relationship is so important in terms of a child feeling known and understood, and can develop a sense of trust, and wanting to take risks, and wanting to try things that they may have been reluctant to try in the past, because they feel the strength and support from that relationship.
Absolutely. And you talk about that emotional development being the foundation of everything. And so I wonder, if we truly centered emotional development in early learning, what would change and what would classrooms feel like?
What would change is that we would be providing from the beginning, when children, as I said early on, are ready to learn, are born to, and also born to learn, that in providing the support for them to really begin to learn and understand, and how to manage their first language, which is that of emotion, and provide the tools in helping them become competent about regulating their own emotions and understanding the emotions of others, we are setting up a prevention framework for all children to be able to develop these skills that are then going to be foundational for lifelong success in life and in learning. And this, from early on, kind of, again, in terms of thinking about the brain, really begins to inform and shape the architecture of the brain in very healthy ways, so that it becomes part of the child's character, part of the child's personality in dealing with life going forward in learning and again, in relating and in relationships. So providing that from early on is critical. And early learning, and it is really, it's not a warm-up for real school. Early learning, this is the most consequential education a human being will ever receive. It is critical because of what's happening within the brain and how rapidly it's developing and how much, possibility there is in terms of how we can help inform and shape that architecture in very helpful and healthy ways for lifelong success. There is no time that is more important, in my opinion, than early childhood in setting the foundation for every child's future and civilization, society.
I'm definitely stealing that line, Donna. The line of early learning is not a warm up for big school. I'm stealing that because so often we hear that, right? You're practicing to be in kindergarten, but that's really not what we're doing, right?
Right.
And we know that from brain science, and we know that from how we see children learn. And so that's really something that I'm going to take away from this conversation, and I'm going to say it all the time. I'm going to take it and make it my own, Donna, because
Okay, go
oftentimes I
ahead.
do that.
And the more people say it, Aruna, I think the more people will begin to, question it and begin to understand it and want to learn more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're rounding out to the close of this, which is really sad because I could talk to you for days, if you could shift one thing in how we understand children, their emotions, their development, their learning, what would it be?
Well, in listening to children for many, many decades, the one thing that children want more than anything is to feel safe and have the permission to be able to share their big feelings and have people allow that to happen and help them with managing and dealing with it. Because again, children aren't born with the ability to manage these big emotions that they have day in and day out, but they are born with the propensity to develop the skills to do that. And that's where the adult comes in to help that child become the best that they can be.
What I'm taking away from this conversation, not only as a person in early learning and policy, but also a social worker and a mental health provider, is that learning doesn't begin with content. It begins with the child's internal world, how they feel, how they regulate, and how they experience safety and connection. And if we don't get that right, everything else sits on a very unstable foundation. Donna certainly has given us a lot to think about, and we are proud users of the Excel curriculum. Our teachers are doing great with it, and we do see lots of movement with our children. If you want to find out more about Excel, definitely connect with Donna. We will have that posted in the webinar for you. If you don't get what we're talking about, reach out to Donna and I, because this is one of the most consequential and important conversations we can have about children. Donna, thank you so much for all the work you've done. You say decades, you look like you're in your 20s, so I don't believe it. But thank you so much for helping us see children more clearly and understanding teaching more accurately. It's been such a pleasure to have you.
It's been such a pleasure to be with you and to have the opportunity to be able to talk about such an important topic when we're talking about our children. Thank you, Aruna, and all the work you do in terms of making the world a better place for children.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners out there, tune in next month, see what's up. And if there's anybody you would like to hear from, let us know so we can make sure they're on next time.